Ez itt a Dunakavicsok podcast. Jövőt formáló gondolatok és hírek a turizmus világából a Duna mentén.
Grüß Gott, szeretettel üdvözlöm turisztikai podcastunk 39. adására kattintó kedves hallgatóinkat. Hát bizony sok víz lefolyt azóta a Dunán, mióta előző adásunk óta találkoztunk, így hogy most annál nagyobb az öröm, hogy ismét együtt vagyunk, és hallgatják az új turizmus világával foglalkozó podcastunkat, amelyet 2024. novemberében rögzítettünk online felvétel formájában, Bécs-Budapest relációban. Én Kovács Balázs vagyok, szerkesztő társam pedig Nagy-Szász István, akivel a szokásos felállásban, duóban jelentkezünk. Mostani műsorunkat azonban nem a szokásos szerkesztésben hallhatják majd, ahogy azt az adásunk címe is szerintem valamennyire sugallja, egyfajta rendhagyó, vagy hát hogy is mondjam, kísérleti adásra készülünk, hogy miért, azt mindjárt elmondjuk önöknek, ehhez azonban szükségem van Istvánra, úgyhogy szólítom is műsorvezető társamat. Szervusz István, grüß Gott!
Grüß Balázs, szervusz Balázs, úgy örülök, hogy szükséged van rám. Úgyhogy üdvözlet innen és Budapest a Dunakavicsok másik hullámhosszának a végén, vagyis ugyanannak a hullámhossznak a budapesti végén.
Képzavarosan, de az adásban.
Az adásban. És valóban hosszúnak tűnhetett ez a hullámcsend az őszelei jelentkezésünk óta, ahogy mondtad, sok víz folyt le a Dunán, meg hordalékfa is, és nem csak képletesen sajnos, hanem a valóságban is túl vagyunk egy rekord árvízen, amely sok maradandó nyomot és kárt hagyott maga mögött, főleg nálatok Ausztriában.
Igen, így igaz, ma jöttem épp vissza Linzből, még mindig egy közel fél órával tovább tart a vonatút, ott a Thun környékén, még sajnos a vasúti pálya szakaszt az alagútban nem sikerült helyreállítani. Elvileg karácsonyi ajándékként majd ez is helyre áll.
Helyre, úgy legyen. Azonban most a pozitív dolgokra koncentrálunk. Rengeteg más eseményen, konferencián vagyunk még túl, illetve turizmus jövője szempontjából izgalmas események sokasodnak a következő napokban, hetekben is.
Esemény hullám a Dunakavicsok hullám hosszá.
Esemény árhullám. A turisztikai szakmai rendezvények egyfajta felívelő hullámának idejét éljük, ezt beszéltük Balázsral. Nincs olyan nap, hogy ne kapnánk valami érdekes eseményre, fórumra, vagy éppen tanácskozásra meghívást Magyarországon, Ausztriában, Szlovákiában, akár Csehországban is. Többek között ez is az oka, hogy rég találkoztunk, egymással is, Balázsral, meg önökkel is. Külön-külön állandó mozgásra vagyunk, mint az atomok, és ritkán sikerül egy időben a mikrofon mögé ülnünk Balázsral, hogy rögzíthessük az adást. Azonban a részleteken nem mutatnám a kedves hallgatók közönségünket, így azt javaslom, Balázs, hogy a konferencia beszámolókat hagyjuk meg egy következő, egyfajta elemző adásra, most pedig inkább avassuk be a hallgatókat, hogy mire is gondoltunk, miben lesz más ez az adás, mint a többi.
No hát akkor lecke föladva, egyrészt a következő 40. adásunkra, meg akkor a mostaniva is, akkor mondhatnám stílusosan lássuk. Ugye szoktuk beszélni, meg a szerkesztőségi elveinkben is benne van, hogy hagyjuk, hogy az élet szerkessze a podcastot, hát így van ez most is. Én tagja vagyok a Tourism Austria közösségnek, jelentsen ez akármit is, röviden csak CTA-nak szoktuk rövidíteni a kezdőbetűkből. Ez az Österreich Verbum keretein belül működő egyfajta ilyen innovációs és tudásmegosztó platform. Egyik küldetésük, hogy a digitalizációval és a fenntarthatósággal kapcsolatos aktuális ismereteket, legfrissebb trendeket megosszák, megkedveltessék tagjaikkal, akik ugye az osztrák szakmabeliek a kollégák.
Aha. Hát eddig elég hasonló a mission, mint nekünk itt a Dunakavicsokban. Ugye mi is egyfajta tudás közvetítő fórumként definiáljuk, vagy látjuk magunkat.
Lehet egyébként, hogy ezért is annyira szimpatikus ez a Tourism Austria, amiről először hallottam, rögtön föl is iratkoztam, és tagja lettem a közösséghez. Csak zárójelbe, amelyhez egyébként az online felületen a hallgatóink is nyugodtan csatlakozhatnak, akit érdekelnek az ilyen jellegű hírek, és bírják a német nyelvet, tegyék meg, majd belinkeljük a blogcikkbe. Zárójel bezárva. Nos, vissza a kérdésedre. Ugye az elmúlt napokban ez a CTA platform egy új hírlevelet indított. Minden nap kapunk egy praktikus, okos, hasznos útravalót a mesterséges intelligencia világából. Tehát az a céljuk, hogy nem ömlesztik az információkat, hanem szépen csepegtetve napi szinten bemutatnak ebbe a hírlevélbe egy hasznos alkalmazást, egy mesterséges intelligencia által vezérelt alkalmazást, például praktikus tippekkel segítenek ezeknek az alkalmazásoknak a hasznosításába, amit ugye a turizmusban dolgozók a mindennapi munkájukba aztán adaptálni tudnak, és ilyenkor mindig kapunk egy-két ilyen pár perces feladatot is, hogy akkor teszteljük az aznapi tudást, amit kaptunk a CTA segítségével. Múlt héten egy Google alapú notebook elem fejlesztést ajánlották, ami a notebook.google.com címen elérhető. Ez egy webes eszköz, teljesen ingyenes, és hát tulajdonképpen fantasztikus, egyfajta integrátor, bármilyen terjedelmű, minőségű, és hát a legtöbb elérhető formátumú adatból, szövegből, fényképből, táblázatból képes összefoglalót, elemzést készíteni. És az aznapi feladatunk múlt héten az volt, hogy teszteljük, töltsünk föl rá tetszőleges tartalmakat, például hangfájlokat, fényképeket, de lehet YouTube linket, Excel táblát, és foglaltassuk össze. Próba feladatként én hogy nem, véletlenül az jutott eszembe, hogy a Dunakavicsok podcast első 2 adását ilyen hangfájl formátumba, és az összesítő, az a 27. adásunk volt, ami egy kicsit összefoglaló. Ezt föltöltöttem egy klikkeléssel, és utána nyomtam egy okét, és hát ugye fantasztikus, ami kijött belőle.
Na, az oké, de mi lett pontosan a végeredmény, mert csigázol ezzel a dologgal?
Hát meggyőző volt, tehát tényleg döbbenetes, hogy milyen gyorsan mit tud, ugye, és ez járult hozzá, hogy a mostani műsorunk tartalmát is alakította ez az alkalmazás. Ugye annyira tetszett a kapott profi eredményt, hogy akkor úgy éreztem, hogy ezt meg kell mutatnom, a más nem neked, de téged nem értelek el, akkor gondoltam, hogy akkor majd a hallgatóknak megmutatjuk, úgyhogy nem csak villámgyorsan, logikusan összefoglalta, kivonatolta a program, ugye az adásokat, hát ugye ezek elég hosszú terjedelmű magyar hangfájl volt, amit föltöltöttünk, hanem ezt ugye németül nekem összefoglalta nagyon logikusan, kiszedte belőle az idézeteket, hogy Deák Ferenctől, Kennedytől milyen idézeteink voltak. Jó volt ezt visszaolvasni, már én el is felejtettem, hogy ilyenek voltak az adásban, hanem, ami még nagyon tetszett, hanem, hogy bónusz trackként az összefoglalók alapján készített egy, hát az ő szerinte lényeges pontokat összegző podcast beszélgetést ebből. Ezt angolul érhető el ez a funkció. Tehát egyfajta ilyen játszva tanítunk, beszélgető stílusban adják elő ezt összefoglalóként. Ugye vélhetőleg azt az analógiát követik ebben, hogy ugye amit hallasz, azt a legtöbbször ugye elfelejted, amit látsz, arra emlékezel, amit kipróbálsz, eljátszol, elmeséled, csinálod, azt megtanulod. És hát ugye nyilván ugye ez egy ilyen tudás megosztó, terjesztő platformként szerintem zseniális.
Tehát ha jól sejtem, akkor amikor ezt meghallgattad, akkor jött ez a pont, hogy többször hívtál, üzengettél, én ugye nagyon csúnya módon nem reagáltam, mert ugye a napi betevőért dolgoztam, és valószínűleg nem volt nálam a telefon, hogy mi lenne, ha rendhagyó műsort csinálnánk, és megmutatnánk a kapott eredményt a hallgatóknak.
Igen, hát ugye ez volt a legnehezebb része az egésznek, ugye az 5. próbálkozásra 2 nap után ugye el is értelek, úgyhogy így köszi utólag is a rábólintást.
Összefolynak
ugye beszéltük, amúgy is hagyjuk, miért ne, hogy akkor az élet szerkessze az adást, és akkor ez volt az a momentum, amikor jelentkeztem nálad, hogy mi lenne, hogyha lenne most egy ilyen angol betét a mostani adásunkban.
A betétdal. Mindegy, jó filmben mindig van egy betétdal. Tehát akkor összefoglalva a hallgatóknak, akik elvesztek a részletekbe, most egyfajta Dunakavicsok a Dunakavicsokban összefoglaló következik, ilyen matroska babaként, amik az adásunk középső részét angolul fogják hallani, amit a mesterséges intelligencia alapú notebook LM segítségével gyártott Balázs. És a 3,5 évvel ezelőtt rögzített 2 bevezető adásunkat, az első és a második.
Akkor kezdtük az egészet.
Igen, milyen fiatalak voltunk és üdék. Tehát az első és a második epizódokat, valamint a 27-et, ami azért volt unikális, mert abban az epizódban az új turizmus lényegét foglaltuk össze, és ha emlékeznek rá, a Rubik kocka analógia alapján szimbolikusan 27 pontban foglaltuk össze ezt.
Ez a 3x3x3 pontosan.
Úgyhogy ezt az applikációt megkérte a Balázs, ezt a 3 epizódot összefoglalta, nekünk ez az alkalmazás, és ezt meg is tette. Majd még az összefoglaló alapján egy saját podcast epizódot is gyártott nekünk, amelyben egy hölgy és egy férfiak beszélgetnek az adásokban hallottakról. Így született meg az ő fordításukban a Danube Pebbles, az a Dunakavicsok angol nyelvű kivonatos összefoglaló, amit a jingle után bemutatunk önöknek.
De hát tényleg, ugye ez volt a kísérleti adás, ugye nem tudom, hogy te hogy vagy vele, nekem az osztrák ismerőseim szokták kérdezni, akik tudják, hogy van egy podcastunk, ugye egy magyar nyelvű podcast, de miről szól, hogy meg lehet-e hallgatni, mondom, meg lehet hallgatni, csak nem sokat fogsz érteni belőle. Most végre lesz egy olyan adásunk, ez a 39., hogyha külföldiek érdeklődnek, hogy mégis miről szól ez az adás, akkor ezt meg tudjuk mutatni, hogy akkor hallgassa meg, tudom, körülbelül a 10. perctől, angolul a mesterséges intelligencia összefoglalta. Ezt ugye vágatlanul tesszük most közzé. Hangsúlyozzuk, hogy nem új tartalom született, tehát nem a mesterséges intelligenciával próbáljuk a természetes unintelligenciánkat palástól elfedni, hanem az előbb említett 3 adás tartalmának az összefoglalója hallatszik most, és ahogy mondtuk, vágatlanul semmit nem tettünk hozzá, semmit nem vettünk ki belőle.
Igen, úgyhogy ne is húzzuk az időt, halljuk az AI-t, ahogy minket lát, ezt a 3 adást, ahogy mondta Balázs, nem megvágva, filter nélkül, őszinte valóságba, és utána visszajövünk és megbeszéljük a hallottakat.
So you want to know more about this new tourism thing, right? Especially with everyone rethinking travel after the pandemic. Well, for this deep dive, we're going to be exploring your source material. 3 episodes of a Hungarian podcast called Dunakavicsok.
Danube Pebbles.
That's it, Danube Pebbles. It features these 2 tourism experts, Balázs Kovács and István Nagy-Szász, who outline 27 key points for building a new tourism model. We'll unpack all those points, but more importantly, we'll help you understand the why behind each one and how it could be relevant to you.
It's really interesting that they're coming from different sides of the tourism world, you know. Balázs is based in Vienna, and he's a consultant, so he's really got his finger on the pulse of everything going on in the industry. And then you have István, he's in Budapest, and he's a real veteran of the hotel industry. So I think having both of their voices in your source material gives us a much more well-rounded view.
Yeah, for sure. And they really jump right into the deep end with their first point, emphasizing that everyone in the industry is already experimenting in this new landscape.
Whether they realize it or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what they say is important is not just trying random things to see what works, but really understanding what matters to your ideal visitor. That's where that targeted experimentation comes in.
Yeah, and that ties in really nicely with their emphasis on sustainability. They're really calling for a full-blown sustainability revolution, which is a big statement.
It is.
I thought it was really striking that they used Austria as an example, a country that's often seen as a leader in environmentalism. But even their overshoot day, which is that day when a country has used up its share of the Earth's resources for the year, it keeps happening earlier and earlier. So that really drives home the point that this old model of constant, limitless growth just isn't viable anymore.
Yeah, they're not afraid to kind of challenge the status quo, are they?
No, not at all.
And it makes you wonder, how do we actually shift away from this constant growth mindset when it's been so ingrained in the industry for so long?
Well, they suggest a pretty radical shift in perspective, really. Moving away from purely economic gains toward what they call a more human-centered approach. They talk about prioritizing the holy trinity of stakeholders, locals, visitors, and tourism workers. It's all about recognizing that a truly successful tourism industry needs to be benefiting everyone involved.
Yeah, right.
And I love that they bring in that quote from Pericles about, not houses finely roofed or the stones of walls well built, nay, but men give a city its quality. Which really emphasizes the importance of people, and connections and well-being in creating a good tourism experience.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond just heads and beds and looking at that bigger picture, isn't it? And I think that's where their concept of embracing creative destruction comes in. I know you've got a knack for connecting these seemingly disparate ideas. So how does that concept, which often refers to economic innovation, apply to something as devastating as a global pandemic?
Right. Well, it is kind of a jarring juxtaposition at first. But I think what they're arguing is that the pandemic, for all its horrors, has kind of forced the tourism industry into this period of intense reflection, like hitting that reset button, It gives us this unique albeit painful, opportunity to rebuild in a way that's more sustainable, more resilient, and ultimately more human-centered. So it's like acknowledging that the old way of doing things just doesn't work anymore and embracing the need for that fundamental change.
So it's not just about tweaking the existing model, but really rethinking the foundation of the whole industry.
Yeah, exactly.
And in your notes, you highlighted this idea of rebuilding trust as being a really critical element of this creative destruction. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, sure. They make the point that tourism relies so heavily on trust.
Yeah.
Trust between travelers and destinations, trust between businesses and their employees, trust in the information we're receiving about the world. And they say this trust has been eroded in recent years, due to the pandemic, the rise of misinformation and skepticism. So, rebuilding that trust is crucial for the future of tourism, being transparent, authentic, and accountable in everything we do.
It makes you wonder, how do you rebuild that trust in a world where everyone seems to have their own version of the truth?
It's a challenge, for sure, and it definitely requires a long-term commitment. No quick fixes or PR stunts will do it.
Right.
They actually point to Austria's Master Plan T, which you highlighted in your notes, as a good example of this long-term thinking.
Yeah, I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty comprehensive strategy. Moving beyond attracting more visitors to focus on creating what they call quality experience spaces. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, they spend a good amount of time talking about Master Plan T, Austria's new tourism strategy.
Yeah.
What really stood out to me was that it explicitly says that simply aiming for more and more tourists isn't the goal. Instead, they want to create these quality experience spaces where everyone benefits, visitors, locals, and the people working in the industry. This, they say, is how Austria is moving from simple tourism to a more holistic visitor economy.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that they acknowledge that just copying what Austria is doing won't work for everyone. Every destination needs its own vision, its own set of goals, but it's a really valuable model for how to think about tourism in a more nuanced and sustainable way.
Right.
It's not just about protecting the environment, but creating a model that actually enhances the quality of life for everyone.
Yeah, it's ambitious.
It's ambitious, but it's really inspiring, too.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like it really ties in with that human-centered approach we were talking about earlier. It's not just about attracting visitors, but making sure that everyone actually benefits from their presence. But how do you balance that with the practical realities of running a tourism business? How do you manage that visitor flow and make sure that you're not overwhelming a destination?
Yeah, that's where they bring in this concept of optimized visitor management.
Okay.
So they're arguing that organizations need to shift their focus from just marketing and attracting visitors to actively managing and optimizing the flow of those visitors. So it's about understanding visitor patterns, seasonality, capacity limits, and then using that information to create a more balanced and sustainable tourism ecosystem. It's not about closing the doors to visitors, but making sure that everyone's having a good experience.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where you have enough visitors to support the industry, but not so many that you're overwhelming the destination or creating a negative experience for anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And they actually go even further. They suggest that we need to rethink how we actually measure success in tourism.
Oh.
They say that focusing on visitor numbers is outdated and misleading. Instead, we need to take a more holistic approach and look at visitor satisfaction, environmental impact, and the overall value that tourism generates for the community.
Yeah, it's like that saying, what gets measured gets managed. If we're only measuring visitor numbers, then that's all we're going to focus on, even if it's at the expense of other things.
Right, exactly. It's about broadening our perspective and looking at the bigger picture. And this is where they bring in the importance of adopting globally recognized sustainability standards. So things like those from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, the GSTC, they can really help provide a common language and a set of benchmarks for measuring and managing sustainability in tourism.
So it's about having a shared understanding of what sustainability means in practice, and then using those standards to guide our actions and measure progress. But it's not just about data and metrics, right? The experts talk a lot about the power of storytelling, too. So how does that fit into this new tourism model?
Storytelling becomes crucial because it's not just about selling a product or an experience. It's about engaging visitors on a deeper level, educating them about the destination, the culture, the values. It's about using those stories to inspire more conscious and responsible travel choices.
So it's about creating a narrative that really connects with people on an emotional level and makes them want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. And they give a great example of this with the city of Linz in Austria, which you highlighted in your material.
Yeah.
They successfully rebranded themselves, moving away from their industrial past to embrace this new identity based on art, culture, and innovation. And they did this by crafting these really compelling narratives that highlighted the city's assets and its commitment to sustainability.
It's proof that storytelling can be a really powerful tool for shaping perceptions and driving positive change.
It really is. It makes you wonder, how can other destinations use storytelling to not just attract visitors, but also to educate and inspire them to become more responsible travelers?
Yeah. What stories are waiting to be told?
Exactly.
That's a great question. And I think that leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Where we're going to explore how these principles are actually being put into action in real-world destinations.
So we've talked about some of those core principles that are driving this whole new tourism idea, but I'm sure you're wondering what it actually looks like in practice. What does it actually mean to be adaptable and creative when things get tough?
Well, the Danube Pebbles podcast actually spends quite a bit of time talking about crisis management. And what I thought was really fascinating is how they highlight these solutions that came about specifically because people were forced to think differently.
Right, like out of necessity almost.
Yeah.
They talk about the Vienna Ice World, which is one of those big mobile ice skating rinks they set up in the city.
Oh, yeah.
And imagine trying to run that during a pandemic, with social distancing and everything.
Yeah, that sounds pretty tricky. People packed together on the ice, bumping into each other. Not exactly a recipe for safety. So what do?
Well, they came up with this really clever solution. They used these digital beepers.
Beepers.
Yeah. So each skater got a beeper with their ticket. And once you registered it, the mapers could track who was skating near whom. So if you got too close to someone for too long, your beeper would go off. Just a little reminder to spread out.
So like a digital chaperone for social distancing on the ice?
Exactly.
Hilarious, but also kind of brilliant.
It is a good example of using technology in creative ways to address these real-world challenges. It wasn't about shutting down the ice rink. It was about keeping it running safely and responsibly.
Makes sense. And this actually leads really well into another fascinating, albeit maybe a bit controversial example they bring up. Vaccine tourism.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when people were traveling specifically to get vaccinated in places where the vaccine was more readily available?
Yeah, it was definitely a hot topic.
It was. And they mentioned how Dubai in particular really capitalized on this trend. They don't necessarily endorse it, from an ethical standpoint.
Yeah, right.
But they bring it up as an illustration of just how adaptable the industry can be.
Yeah, for better or for worse, it shows how quickly these new demands and trends can pop up and how destinations need to be ready to respond.
It makes you think, what other unexpected travel niches might pop up as this new tourism continues to evolve?
Oh, that's a good question. It's something we should definitely keep an eye on. But one thing's for sure, this adaptability and creativity are going to be essential skills for anyone working in the industry.
Absolutely. The experts actually spent a good amount of time comparing how Austria and Hungary, two neighboring countries with really different tourism histories, have approached crisis management. What were some of the key takeaways that came out of that?
One of the most striking observations, I think, is how the pandemic really exposed the vulnerability of tourism models that are too reliant on international visitors. So Budapest, for example, they saw a significant drop in tourism revenue when international travel basically stopped.
It was a wake-up call to diversify, wasn't it? Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Exactly. In fact, István, the hotel industry expert, is pretty blunt about this. He points out that Budapest, despite having this vibrant tourism scene, had become a bit complacent relying on international tourism and hadn't done enough to cultivate the domestic market.
Yeah. So when that flow of international tourists dried up, there wasn't a strong enough domestic market to take its place.
Right.
It's a valuable lesson for any destination that's maybe a little too dependent on one type of visitor.
Absolutely. It highlights the importance of creating those appealing experiences for all types of visitors, not just those international tourists.
Right.
It's about building a more resilient and diversified tourism ecosystem.
So beyond diversifying markets, what other crisis management strategies did they discuss?
Well, Balázs talks about how Austria, with its much longer history of tourism development, was in a better position to sort of draw on past experiences to navigate the crisis.
Okay.
So he mentions how back in the 19th century, they were already forming these destination management organizations. And these early organizations really helped to coordinate tourism efforts, to think about the long-term sustainability of the industry.
So they had that foresight to plan for the long term and build that resilient foundation.
Yeah.
Learning from the past, basically, to anticipate those future challenges.
Yeah, exactly. And while they acknowledge that no one has all the answers, they really emphasize the importance of collaboration and knowledge sharing, both within and across national borders.
Which is what they're doing with their podcast, right? Creating that platform to discuss these issues and bring together these different perspectives.
Exactly. And that collaborative spirit goes beyond just talking about problems. It can lead to actual innovative solutions.
Right.
They bring up the Twin City liner again, that boat service connecting Vienna and Bratislava.
Okay.
But this time they highlight how it won an award for its marketing efforts. So during its 2 millionth passenger celebration, they promoted these multi-country trips.
Interesting.
Which really showcases how tourism can benefit from thinking regionally, not just nationally.
That's fantastic. It's a great example of how cooperation can actually lead to new opportunities and even more appealing tourism products.
Yeah, for sure.
Now let's talk about one of the most debated topics in tourism these days, the vaccine passport or green passport.
Right.
It really sparked a lot of conversation about individual freedom versus collective responsibility. What were the experts' thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a thorny issue. And they acknowledge that complexity, recognizing the tension between those who want to prioritize individual liberty and those who are focused on public health. And they don't really come down firmly on one side or the other.
There's no easy answers there.
No, not really. But they did point out that from a purely tourism perspective, these vaccine passports could potentially help the industry recover. If vaccinated individuals could travel more freely, it could help boost demand and restore confidence. So it's kind of a pragmatic view, I guess. Recognizing the potential economic benefits while acknowledging those ethical complexities.
It's about understanding the nuances and the trade-offs involved. And speaking of complex issues, how did they address this evolving relationship between humans and technology in the tourism industry?
This is something that comes up a lot in their conversations. They recognize the potential of these digital technologies, especially in areas like visitor management, product development, and marketing. But they're also cautious about using them in a way that really serves human needs and enhances the experience rather than diminishes it.
It's about finding that balance, isn't it? Using technology to make tourism better, not to erase the human connection.
Exactly. And they highlight AI as a prime example of this. AI can automate those routine tasks and free up humans to focus on creating those personalized experiences that visitors are looking for.
So it's about using AI strategically, not letting it take over completely.
Right. They warn against letting AI lead to this dehumanized industry. It's about human oversight, ethical considerations, and ensuring that technology remains a tool, not a replacement.
That makes sense. Now, this might be a bit of a jump, but you mentioned this fascinating concept of neuromarketing in your notes.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what I think it is? Like understanding how our brains respond to marketing messages?
Yeah, you got it. It's about using insights from neuroscience to craft more effective marketing campaigns. And what's really interesting is the idea that our unconscious minds play a much bigger role in our decision-making than we realize.
So tapping into those subconscious triggers to influence behavior, it sounds a bit like mind control, doesn't it?
It does raise some ethical questions for sure, and they acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But they present it as this powerful tool that can be used for good or for ill. And when you combine that with AI and other digital technologies, neuromarketing has the potential to really reshape the tourism landscape.
It makes you wonder, will this lead to more personalized and engaging tourism experiences? Or will it create this world where our every move is predicted and manipulated? It feels like we're entering uncharted territory here.
Yeah, definitely something to watch closely as these technologies develop. And it's a good reminder that the future of tourism isn't predetermined. It's something that we are actively shaping with the choices we make today.
That is a powerful thought. And it reminds me of something else they talk about, this idea of using the Rubik's Cube as a symbol. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. They're fascinated by the Rubik's Cube. In fact, they use it as an analogy for their 27 points. They say there are 43 trillion possible combinations on a Rubik's Cube.
Wow.
Just like there are countless ways to combine those 27 principles to create a new and better tourism model.
So just as you can twist and turn a Rubik's Cube to find a solution, we can experiment and find these innovative ways to reshape tourism.
Exactly.
But speaking of fascinating examples, didn't they also promise some kind of colorful story at the end of each episode?
Oh, yeah. They always wrap things up with some intriguing anecdote or observation. So in one episode, István actually shares a story about the world's first 3D printed hotel.
Wait, a 3D printed hotel?
Yeah.
That sounds like something out of science fiction.
I know, right? It just shows how technology is pushing those boundaries in tourism. This hotel is actually being planned in Texas, designed to look like Luke Skywalker's home on Tatooine. And it's going to be constructed entirely using 3D printing technology.
So no more noisy construction sites and mountains of waste.
Exactly. It's far more sustainable, using only the exact amount of materials needed, very little waste. Plus, it allows for a lot more design freedom, creating those unique structures that blend into the environment.
That is amazing, like a glimpse into the future of how we can build things in a more sustainable and imaginative way. And what was Baláz's story?
Well, his was less of a story, more of a suggestion. He proposes using the Rubik's Cube, that symbol of problem solving and ingenuity, as a representation for Hungary's upcoming presidency of the European Union.
Oh, interesting. How does that work?
Well, he points out that the EU currently has 27 member states, same as the number of cubes on a Rubik's Cube.
Right.
So he suggests that Hungary, as the presiding country, could be represented by that central cube, with all the other 26 countries revolving around it.
Ah, I see. It's like a visual metaphor for the interconnectedness and that collaborative spirit of the European Union. It highlights the power of creativity and innovation, just like the Rubik's Cube itself.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even in these complex systems, there are always opportunities for creative solutions and new ways of working together. And who knows, maybe Hungary's presidency will actually unlock some of those solutions.
I love that. It brings a sense of optimism and possibility to the whole conversation. We've covered so much, from those core principles of this new tourism to those real-world examples, even a glimpse into the future. But I think our listeners are probably thinking, what can I do? How can I be a part of this change?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's what we'll talk about in the last part of our deep dive. We'll explore some specific actions individuals can take to actually support a more sustainable and human-centered tourism industry.
Perfect. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, so we've gone through all the ingredients of this new tourism recipe, the principles, the innovative examples, the potential challenges. But now it's time to make this a little more personal. You might be thinking, all of this sounds great, but what can I do to be a part of this shift?
Right. Well, the good news is, even those small individual choices can make a difference. And like with so many things, awareness is the first step. So before you book that flight or that hotel room, take a moment to think about the impact of your travel choices. What are the destination's environmental practices like? How does the business treat its employees, engage with the local community?
It's about going from being a passive tourist to a more conscious and engaged traveler.
Exactly. And you can put that awareness into action in so many different ways. For example, you could specifically seek out businesses that prioritize sustainability and ethical practices. Look for certifications like the Global Sustainable Tourism Council label, the GSTC, which is a good sign that they're committed to responsible tourism.
Yeah, it's like voting with your dollars. You're supporting businesses that align with your values.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the big players, right? Supporting those local businesses and communities can have a huge ripple effect.
Absolutely. Choosing locally owned accommodations, restaurants, tour operators, that ensures that your money stays within the community and actually benefits the people who live there. And it goes beyond just the economic impact. Even small gestures of respect and cultural sensitivity can make a big difference.
Right.
Like, imagine learning a few phrases in the local language.
Yeah.
It shows that you're making an effort to connect on a deeper level.
It's about those human connections, So those moments of genuine interaction that really make travel so enriching. Now, we've talked a lot about the potential downsides of technology, but can it also be a force for good in this new tourism model?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many great apps and websites out there that can help you make more informed travel choices.
Right.
You can find eco-friendly accommodations, calculate your carbon footprint, even offset those emissions. Technology can connect travelers with those sustainable options and empower them to make a real difference.
It's about using the power of technology for good, not just passively consuming information, but using it to make our travel more responsible. And speaking of amplifying impact, what about social media? Can we use that to promote responsible tourism?
Definitely. Share your experiences, highlight businesses that are doing amazing things, advocate for responsible practices, use your platform to encourage others to do the same. Together we can really create that ripple effect of positive change.
Yeah, it's about using our voices to shape the narrative, to show that responsible tourism isn't just a niche trend, but it's a movement. It's something that's gaining real momentum.
Exactly. And if you're really feeling motivated, why not take it a step further? Volunteer for a conservation project, join a citizen science initiative, or even just donate to a cause that's supporting sustainable tourism. There are so many ways to get involved.
It's about going beyond just being a passive observer and becoming a participant, an active participant in shaping the future of tourism.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. Whether you're a traveler, a business owner, or just someone who cares about the future of this industry, we all have a part to play.
It's a collective effort. And every single choice we make, every action we take, contributes to the bigger picture. This new tourism, it isn't just some recipe we follow blindly. It's an invitation to be more mindful, adaptable, creative, and engaged with the world around us.
And as Balázs and István remind us, the true value of tourism goes beyond just the economic benefits. It's about the enriching experiences that it creates for everyone involved, the travelers, the local communities, and the planet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the new tourism recipe.
Yeah, sounds good.
We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, maybe even a little bit challenging.
And remember, the ingredients for a more sustainable, equitable, and enriching tourism industry are all around us. It's up to each of us to use them and create something meaningful.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep that conversation going, and most importantly, keep traveling with intention. Because together, we really can create a tourism industry that benefits both people and the planet.
It's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Ez itt a Dunakavicsok Podcast. Turisztikai hírek, jövőt formáló gondolatok a Duna régióból.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're heading to the Danube region to explore some really interesting ideas about the future of travel.
Yeah, we've been listening to this Hungarian podcast called Dunakavicsok,
Which translates to?
Danube Pebbles.
Okay.
And it's full of insights about where tourism is going in the Danube region and really beyond.
I'm intrigued. So what kind of insights are we talking about?
Well, in the 27th episode, they present this bold manifesto for what they call new tourism. Tourism without tourists.
Tourism without tourists. That sounds a little counterintuitive.
It does, right?
I like.
And they actually use a Rubik's Cube analogy to illustrate the possibilities.
Okay, I love a good analogy.
They say, just like a Rubik's Cube has 43 trillion combinations.
Wow.
There are countless ways to reshape the travel industry.
Okay, that's a great visual. I could see where they're going with this.
So this manifesto, how does it actually break things down?
Yeah.
They present it as 27 key points.
27 points. That's a lot.
It's almost like a recipe book for a more sustainable and fulfilling way to experience the world.
27 points is a lot to unpack, but I'm up for the challenge if it means shaking things up and reimagining what travel could be.
For sure. And don't worry, we won't drown you in all 27.
Okay.
We're going to focus on the most thought-provoking points and how they might be relevant to you, the listener, and your own travel experiences.
Sounds good. So tell me, what are some of the core ingredients in this new tourism recipe?
Well, right off the bat, they emphasize the need to focus on the essentials.
Okay.
They say, in a world of constant distraction and information overload, we need to strip away the noise and really get back to the heart of why we travel in the first place, to connect, to learn to grow.
Yeah, I can see that. So often it feels like travel has become more about checking things off a list than really experiencing a place.
Exactly. And that ties into their next point, which is all about embracing a sustainability revolution in tourism.
I was hoping sustainability would be in there. But what does that actually look like? Do they give any specifics?
They do. They stress that tourism can't just be about short-term profits anymore. It has to shift towards long-term sustainability, environmentally, socially, and economically. They even quote a Hungarian statesman, Diák Ferenc, who said, if we buttoned a coat the wrong way, we must first unbutton it completely and then start again.
I love that analogy. So it's about a fresh start. Okay, so sustainability is key.
Yeah.
What else?
Their third point really drives home this idea of a fresh start. They say it's time to put People first, not profits.
Ooh, that's a bold statement. What did that mean in practice?
It means shifting the focus from solely satisfying tourist demands to actually improving the well-being of everyone involved, tourists, locals, and tourism workers alike. They talk about moving away from that homo touristicus mindset where travelers are seen as just consumers.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that way sometimes. I'm just another number in a sea of tourists.
Right. And this manifesto challenges us to think differently. It says we need to recognize the humanity in everyone involved and foster genuine connection and respect.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these points are building on each other. But let's be realistic. Is it even possible to completely transform such a massive industry?
That's where their fourth point comes in. Question everything. They acknowledge that a complete overhaul is daunting, but we need to start by challenging the status quo, especially the dogma of endless growth.
It's true. The constant push for more tourists, more attractions, everything can be overwhelming and even destructive.
Exactly. And that's where their fifth point comes in, which is to cultivate a creative mindset.
Okay.
They're saying we need to find fresh and innovative ways to solve the complex challenges facing the tourism industry. We can't keep doing things the way they've always been done.
This is reminding me of that Rubik's Cube analogy. They're encouraging us to experiment, to try new combinations, to find a solution that works for everyone.
Precisely. And speaking of shaking things up, their sixth point is pretty blunt. The age of unlimited growth is over.
Wow, they're not mincing words. Does that mean they're anti-tourism or something?
Not at all. They're simply acknowledging that we can't keep expanding tourism indefinitely without considering the environmental and social consequences. It's about finding a balance between economic development and preserving the planet and its cultures.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do they propose we rebuild that balance?
Well, their seventh point gets to the heart of the matter. Rebuild trust in tourism.
No.
They believe that trust is essential for creating a more sustainable and equitable industry.
Trust between who? The travelers and the destinations.
Yes, but also between all the different stakeholders in the tourism ecosystem. They argue that we need to move away from transactional relationships and towards genuine partnerships based on mutual respect and benefit.
I see it's about seeing everyone as part of the same team, working towards a common goal.
Exactly. And to make that teamwork sustainable in the long run, they suggest adopting a circular approach in all aspects of tourism. That's their eighth point.
Okay, circular approach. I'm not sure I follow. What does that look like in the context of travel?
Think about reducing waste, reusing resources, and closing loops. It's about creating a more regenerative system where resources are used more efficiently and waste is minimized throughout the entire tourism ecosystem.
Ah, that makes sense. So it's like applying the principles of a circular economy to the travel industry.
Exactly. And they point out that we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Their ninth point encourages us to learn from others who are already implementing successful sustainability practices around the world.
That's a great point. There's so much we can learn from each other.
Absolutely. And to tie all these ideas together, they suggest developing a master plan, which is their 10th point.
A master plan. So it's about having a clear roadmap for the future of tourism.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They argue that a comprehensive strategic framework is essential for guiding the transition to a new model of tourism that is truly sustainable and beneficial for everyone.
It makes sense you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, and transforming an entire industry is a much bigger task.
Right. And just like with a blueprint, you need to have clear goals in mind. That's their 11th point. Define clear goals.
So it's not enough to just say, we want sustainable tourism. We need specific, measurable objectives to track progress and ensure accountability.
Exactly. They stress the importance of articulating those objectives for sustainable tourism development. It's about moving from lofty aspirations to concrete actions.
This is all very strategic and forward-thinking. I'm curious, how does this tie into their earlier point about putting people first?
That's where their 12th point comes in. Prioritize quality of life. They argue that we need to shift the focus from solely satisfying tourist demands to actually improving the well-being of all stakeholders, including residents and tourism workers.
That's a crucial point. It's about recognizing that tourism should benefit everyone, not just those who are visiting.
Exactly. And to achieve that, they suggest embracing the concept of a visitor economy, which is their 13th point.
A visitor economy. I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully understand it.
It's about broadening our perspective beyond traditional tourism to encompass a more holistic view of visitor experiences and their impact.
So it's not just about the tourists who come for a week or two, but about anyone who visits a place for any reason.
Exactly. And by taking a more inclusive approach, we can create a more sustainable and beneficial tourism industry that benefits everyone involved.
This is all very thought-provoking, but we've covered a lot of ground already. Maybe we should take a quick pause before we dive into the rest of these points.
That's a great idea. A short break will give us a chance to digest all this information and prepare for the rest of our deep dive into new tourism. So we're back, and we're diving deeper into this new tourism manifesto from the Dunakavicsok podcast.
Yeah, before the break, we were talking about that idea of a visitor economy, like looking beyond just the traditional tourists.
Exactly. And their 14th point kind of picks up on that. It focuses on optimizing visitor flow, managing all those visitors.
That makes a lot of sense, especially with all the talk about over-tourism these days.
Right. It's about how to make sure that tourism benefits everyone, not just the visitors, but also the people who live in the destinations.
So like spreading out visitors, making sure things don't get too crowded.
Exactly. And maybe encouraging people to visit during the off-season or exploring lesser-known spots.
I like that it's not just about reducing the number of tourists. It's about being more thoughtful about how we travel.
Right. And their 15th point really emphasizes that it's about focusing on the common good.
Common good? How does that apply to tourism?
Well, it means that tourism shouldn't just be about making money. It should be about making a positive impact on the world.
So it's about thinking about the social and environmental consequences of our travel choices.
Exactly. And to make sure we're actually measuring that impact, their 16th point talks about developing new metrics for success. It's not just about counting heads and dollars anymore.
So instead of just looking at how many tourists visit a place or how much money they spend, we should also be looking at things like how tourism affects the environment or the quality of life for local residents.
Yeah, exactly. And to make sure that impact is positive, their 17th point focuses on embracing international sustainability standards, like those set by the Global Sustainable Tourism Council.
Okay, so it's about having a common set of guidelines and best practices that everyone in the tourism industry can follow.
Exactly. And that can help make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to sustainability.
Okay, so we've got these big picture goals, but how do we make them a reality?
Well, their 18th point is all about storytelling.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
So how does that fit into the equation?
They believe that we need to move beyond just marketing destinations, those glossy brochures and catchy slogans. We need to start crafting compelling narratives that really engage travelers on a deeper level.
So it's about telling stories that connect with people emotionally and intellectually.
Exactly. And those stories should reflect the values of this new, more conscious approach to tourism. That's point number 19.
So instead of just promoting escapism and luxury, we should be highlighting the authentic cultural experiences and the natural beauty of a place.
Right, and also sharing stories about the people who live there and the challenges they face.
I love that idea. It's about using storytelling to create a more meaningful and responsible travel experience.
And point number 20 really emphasizes that we need to challenge the status quo. We can't just keep doing things the way they've always been done.
So it's about being willing to experiment with new ideas and approaches.
Exactly. And they believe that by challenging assumptions and trying new things, we can find innovative solutions to the problems facing the tourism industry.
This is all very inspiring, but it's a lot to take in. How can we as individuals make a difference?
Well, point number 21 focuses on embracing regional authenticity, celebrating what makes each place unique.
So instead of trying to create a cookie-cutter experience for tourists, we should be showcasing the distinct culture, history, and natural beauty of each destination.
Exactly. And they believe that this will lead to more meaningful and sustainable tourism experiences.
I love that. It's about appreciating the diversity and richness of the world we live in.
Exactly. And their 22nd point kind of builds on that. It emphasizes the importance of life quality and enjoyment.
Wait, isn't that the whole point of travel, to enjoy yourself?
You'd think so, right? But they argue that too often we get so caught up in planning and sightseeing that we forget to actually enjoy the experience, to really be present in the moment.
I know what you mean. Sometimes I feel like I'm rushing through an itinerary instead of savoring the journey.
Exactly. And that's why they encourage us to slow down and really appreciate the simple joys of travel.
It's about quality over quantity.
Exactly. And speaking of quality, point 23 focuses on facilitating meaningful interactions between visitors and locals.
So it's about going beyond those superficial tourist interactions and really connecting with the people who live in the places we visit.
Exactly. They believe that tourism should be about more than just seeing the sights. It should be about experiencing a place through the eyes of the people who call it home.
That's a beautiful idea. It's about recognizing that everyone has a story to tell and that travel can be a powerful way to bridge cultural divides.
And to help facilitate those connections, they see a role for technology. Point number 24 is all about harnessing the power of digitalization.
Okay, so how can technology help us have more meaningful travel experiences?
Well, they believe that technology can be used to enhance travel experiences and promote sustainability, but only if it's used thoughtfully and responsibly.
So it's about finding the right balance between technology and human connection.
Exactly. Think about apps that connect travelers with local guides or language learning tools that make it easier to communicate with people from different cultures.
Those are great examples. It's about using technology to break down barriers, not create them.
And speaking of breaking down barriers, their 25th point is all about embracing the power of networks.
Networks, so like social media.
That's part of it, but they're also talking about collaboration and partnerships between different stakeholders in the tourism industry, businesses, local communities, governments, and even travelers themselves.
So it's about working together to create a more sustainable and equitable tourism industry.
Exactly. And they even believe that artificial intelligence can play a role in that. Their 26th point is about utilizing AI responsibly.
AI in tourism. That sounds futuristic.
It is. They recognize that AI has the potential to revolutionize many aspects of travel, but it's important to use it ethically and make sure it benefits everyone, not just the tourism industry.
So it's about using AI as a tool to enhance human experiences, not replace them.
Exactly. And their final point brings it all together. It's about daring to change and adapt.
I love that. It's a call to action, a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of tourism.
Exactly. They believe that the tourism industry needs to be flexible, adaptable, and constantly evolving to meet the changing needs of travelers and the planet.
So much to think about. I mean, where do we even begin? Like, how do we as travelers actually put all these ideas into practice?
Well, they emphasize that it all starts with us, making more conscious choices about how and why we travel.
Okay, so like thinking before we book that trip to Cancun.
Exactly, like asking ourselves some tough questions. Where am I going? Why am I going there? And what impact will my visit have on this place and its people?
That's a good point. It's so easy to get swept up in the excitement of travel and forget about the bigger picture.
Right, and those questions can help bring us back down to earth. So one practical step they suggest is choosing destinations and businesses that are genuinely committed to sustainability.
Okay, so doing our research, supporting the good guys.
Exactly. Look for places that have eco-certifications or community-based tourism initiatives. Put your money where your values are.
Makes sense. And I know they talk a lot about connecting with local communities in a meaningful way.
Yeah, they're big on that. It's about getting off the beaten path a little bit. Maybe taking a cooking class from a local family or volunteering with a community organization.
So it's not just about seeing the sights, it's about experiencing the culture through the eyes of the people who live there.
Exactly. And they also talk about technology and how it can be a tool for good in tourism.
Yeah, like those apps that help you find locally owned restaurants or translate languages.
Exactly. But again, it's about balance, using technology to enhance our experiences, not to replace human connection.
Right. We don't want to end up spending our whole trip staring at our phones.
No, exactly. The goal is to use technology to connect more deeply with the world, not to disconnect from it.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on what travel can be.
Me too. It's inspiring to see that there are people out there who are really thinking about how to make tourism a force for good.
Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on something they said that really stuck with me. They said, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success.
I love that quote. It really sums up their whole philosophy, doesn't it?
It does. It's a reminder that travel should be about more than just checking things off a list. It should be about finding joy and fulfillment and connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
So well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. It's been a fascinating journey into the world of new tourism.
We hope you've learned something new and that you'll join us next time for another deep dive into the world of travel.
Until then, happy travels, everyone.
No hát, itt vagyunk a mesterséges intelligencia után hús-vér emberként. Decit, hát mit szólsz hozzá, kedves István, Nagy-Szász?
Igen, viccesen mondja a nevemet, ahogy igen, tőlünk keletre, vagy nyugatra, bocsánat, senki nem tudja kimondani ezt, hogy Nagy. Balázs tényleg bámulatosan jól összefoglalta a 3 adásunk lényegét, ez a beszélgetés, amit produkált az alkalmazás. Egyébként hátborzongató. Már el is felejtettem egyébként, hogy milyen témáink voltak 3,5 évvel ezelőtt. Ugye a Covid-járvány alatt, és például ez a bécsi jégpályákon alkalmazott, ez a nyomkövető ketyere, vagy mi volt, ez már abszolút nem emlékeztem, hogy egyáltalán beszéltünk ilyenről.
Hát akkor ezek voltak a hírek, és ezek voltak az innovációk, hogy ugye milyen megoldások, digitális megoldások vannak a turizmusban, a szabadidőgazdaságban. Egyébként a Dunakavicsok kiejtésben is beletört még a mesterséges intelligenciának a picskája. Nem csak a nevekbe. A Balást én is megszoktam, hogy azt egyszer reménytelen, hogy Magyarországon kívül az bárhol helyesen kiejtsék.
Igen, a csé az meg egy kitolás az angol nyelveknek. Na, pont ezen gondolkodtam, hogy biztos létezik már olyan megoldás, hogy a 2 protagonista a mi hangunkon mondja el az összefoglalót, hogy így egyszerre több nyelven is meghallgathatóvá válna az adás akár.
Igen. Léteznek már egyébként ilyen megoldások. Legutóbb, hát mondani se kell, pont egy ösztereikverbungos workshopon láttam egy EMI vezérelt filmkészítő szoftvert, amely már képes erre, amit mondasz. Pár perc alatt képes egy rövid film átszinkronizálása, háttérhangok, minden meghallott háttérzajok, csak a beszélőnek a kiejtése és a hangja meg a nyelv változik. Ugye ebben szemléltették a kollégák, hogy milyen könnyű tulajdonképpen turisztikai kisfilmeket adaptálni, megcsinálni, és ezt akár súfni módszerrel, ahogy előbb ezt a podcast angol nyelvű részt megcsináltuk, ugyanígy ilyen gyorsasággal már kisfilmek is készülhetnek. Tehát van hova tovább fejlődnünk még itt a podcastba, van már most is hozzá technológia, de szerintem az imént prezentált eredményünk is önmagában elég meggyőző és élvezhető. Főleg, hogyha tudjuk, amit ugye mondtam, hogy a 3 adás feltöltése után csak egy okét nyomtam, és minden úgy jött pár perc alatt, ahogy önök az imént ezt hallották. Úgyhogy továbbra is csak azt tudom mondani, hogy próbálják ki, kísérletezzenek vele, megéri, hasznos eszköz lesz a mindennapokban.
Én is így gondolom, úgyhogy kérjük hallgatóinkat, írják meg, hogy mi a véleményük a hallottakról, a végeredményről. Javasoljuk emellett, hogy próbálják ki az alkalmazást, és adaptálják a saját munkájukba.
Igen, remek összefoglalók készíthetőek, akár katalógusok, vagy műszaki leírások, vagy akár a szálloda mérlegének az összefoglalója, a korábbi üzleti elemzések, jelentések, marketingtervek összefoglalására, vagy a vendégek számára szórakoztató kis sztorika, környékről, látnivalókról, tehát mindenféle témában, ráadásul egy szórakoztató podcastot is kapnak a végén, amit a 2 műsor között a Dunakavicsok mellett tudnak majd még hallgatni. Tehát én is csak biztatnám önöket, hogy írják meg, hogy kifejezetten a turizmus területén önök mire használnak ilyen, vagy ehhez hasonló applikációkat, és hogy mire tudnák ezt használni.
Rendhagyó adást ígértük, szerintem meg is kapták a kedves hallgatók, mára legyen ennyi, és gondolkodjunk közösen a megtapasztaltakról. Az ilyenkor szokásos kis színes történetek idejében pedig inkább mondjuk azt el, hogy a következő adásban miről fogunk beszélni. Beszámolunk majd olyan konferenciákról, mint az ősz elején Veszprémbe tartott EKF örökség konferencia.
Igen, ezzel is adósak vagyunk még valóban.
Tapasztalatai, igen. Vagy a napokban megrendezésre kerülő Wien Turizmus éves seregszámlán. Ez minden évben izgalmas. Igyekszünk részt venni a European Tourism Forum rendezvényén, amely a magyar EU elnökség kiemelt turisztikai rendezvénye. Innen is köszönjük a meghívást, valószínűleg én leszek jelen legalább egy fél napot, illetve hozunk majd az első kézből beszámolót a Nemzetközi Hajózási Konferenciáról.
Itt meg én próbálom képviselni majd a Dunakavicsokat.
Igen, és az örök Liebling, Linzben is gyűlnek az újabb jó gyakorlatok, ha jól vagyok informálva, szerkesztő társam, social media oldalairól.
Teljesen up-to-date vagy, most a felvétel előtt érkeztem vissza Linzből, készül a fenntarthatósági stratégiájuk, úgyhogy lesz muníció bőven a következő adásokban, úgyhogy Szerintem a búcsú ideje jött el, de még mielőtt ezt megtennénk, kérjük, hogy kövessenek a Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube csatornákon, ahogy el szoktuk mondani, ne csak lájkolják, hanem iratkozzanak is föl, értékeljék, illetve osszák meg, ajánlják tovább ismerőseiknek a friss, ropogós Dunakavicsokat, és osszák, terjesszék az új turizmusról szóló evangéliumunkat az elkövetkező időszakban, akár a mostani részt az angolul beszélő külföldi ismerőseikkel, akik érdeklődnek Magyarország, Ausztria, a Duna régió és az új turizmus iránt.
Így igaz, észrevételeiket, javaslataikat várjuk a podcast@dunakavicsok.hu címen. Természetesen a bemutatott EMI alkalmazás elérhetőségéről szoktuk a közösségi médiás megosztások alapját bejelentő blogcikkben is belinkeljük majd önöknek.
Meg ahogy ígértem, ugye a CTA, a Tourism Austria platform elérhetőségét is, számos egyéb érdekes más applikáció, például van egy prezentációkészítő applikáció, ami pikpak összetesz akár meglévő prezentációból egy újat, vagy akár csak egy rövid brief alapján, egy teljesen újat, saját magától, tehát van rengeteg olvasnivaló ajánlás, mesterséges intelligencia, a turizmus best practice-ek területéről, úgyhogy forgassák, kattintsák majd haszonnal, és hát ilyenkor lehet jobb, mint hangoljanak mindenhol, és mindenkor a Dunakavicsok hullámhosszára, hideg napok jönnek, begyújtott kemence mellett a Dunakavicsok hallgatásánál nincs jobb foglalatosság, és akkor a előbb István által beharangozott témákkal, beszámolókkal és egyéb aktualitásokkal, ahogy mondani szoktuk, tovább gondolásra gondolt gondolatunkkal, reményeink szerint tényleg hamarosan jelentkezünk, addig is a viszontlátásra.
Auf Wiederhören.
És viszonthallásra.
Ez volt mára a Dunakavicsok turisztikai podcast. Benne a jövő gondolatait tolmácsoló Nagy-Szász István és Kovács Balázs.